The scene begins as the camera zooms in on the Cobblepot Manor. If you're familiar with Batman lore, then you probably already know the name Cobblepot, or at the very least have heard of it beforehand. The camera then zooms upwards to a silhouette image of what appears to be a man staring out the window of the mansion. As the scene cuts into the mansion, we are greeted by... For the longest time, I didn't realize that Mr. Cobblepot was performed by Paul Reubens. Then again, he only makes a small cameo at best. It's funny to think that if Tim Burton had shot this film in the late 90s, you could pretty much guarantee that Mr. Cobblepot would have been performed by Johnny Depp. In fact, knowing Tim Burton, he probably would have had Johnny Depp play Batman, or even the Penguin. Now that would be a really bizarre image to think about. Okay, calm down. It was just a joke. Moving on, Mr. Cobblepot then hears his wife screaming from the other room. As he makes his way to the room, he passes by the nurse and the doctor, who seem a bit unnerved, for whatever reason. This is actually a little detail I hadn't noticed in the past, but the doctor is holding a tissue over his nose. While it seems meaningless on the surface, but apparently he was bitten on the nose by the newborn baby. Assuming that is the case, it's a nice little foreshadowing to what is arguably the most infamous scene in the entire film. I probably don't need to show a clip of it, but I'm still going to. Now, there is a bit of debate among fans of the film when it comes to the true intention of Oswald's parents. It would generally come down to one of three options. Are they A. Abusive parents who didn't want their deformed child to sully their good name? B. Well-intentioned extremists who wanted to spare their child the cruelty of growing up as a freak? Or C. That they viewed their child as a monster and feared what he might do to others when he got older? Personally, I would rule out B, seeing as there's nothing in particular that implies that they're trying to protect their son from being viewed as a freak, whereas locking him up in a cage could suggest that it is indeed A. However, the fact that he tortured/murdered a cat as an infant could heavily lead towards C. There's enough evidence to suggest that it could be A or C. Hell, for all we know, it could be a little bit of all of them. I'm assuming that Tim Burton purposely set it up that way in order to leave it up to the audience interpretation. So unless Tim Burton himself or someone involved within the production outright confirms it, it really could be anyone's guess. However, after watching this opening many times now, I'm going to give my overall impression. From what little we see of Tucker and Esther Cobblepot, they're portrayed as your stereotypical wealthy class. In most products, that alone would be enough to say that they were ashamed of their deformed child and didn't want him to ruin their reputation. But seeing as this is Batman, who in and of itself is a subversion of that very archetype, it would be too simple an option. Maybe it's just the actors, but there's something about the way they act that just doesn't scream corrupt bastards. To me, they just seem like two normal human beings that just happen to be wealthy, but that's just my interpretation. However, I'm going to have to go with option C and say that they did view their child as a monster and fear what he might do to others when he got older. For me, what really sells it is their "what have we done" look as they toss their son into the river. An abusive parent that didn't care for their child to begin with would not have that kind of reaction. Oh, and by the way, Merry Christmas to you as well, kind strangers. The scene then ends with the sound of the little penguin crying as it begins one of the best Batman films to ever grace the silver screen. While the sequence is all but finished at this point, there's really not much more to say, seeing as we're just watching a basket floating down the river. However, I do wish to take a moment to compliment the score. Danny Elfman, of course, needs no introduction. If you've seen the first Batman, which I would assume the majority of you already have, then you know he's already made a phenomenal score with that film. Here, however, he takes the pre-existing theme from the first film and adds another layer to it. While the original theme was more epic and triumphant, the one in Batman Returns is far more gloomy and somber, much like the film itself. There's something eerily beautiful about this theme, especially when combined with the brooding atmosphere surrounding Gotham. I can't say for sure which version I tend to prefer, though I do find myself coming back to this one more often than the original. But then again, that may just be because I tend to watch Batman Returns much more than the original. The scene ends as Oswald's basket floats over towards the ramp in the zoo's penguin exhibit. He is then greeted by a group of penguins, whom are implied to be the ones that had raised him. Though the film never goes into any detail as how and why these particular penguins are abnormally intelligent, some have theorized that the toxic waste within the sewer may be what increased their overall intelligence. And that was the intro to Batman Returns, a good opening to a good film. I hope you enjoyed this little video, and if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. Thank you for your time, and have a nice night.